Hi, I'm Miles and this is Auto-Minded. This is the 50th anniversary of the Lotus Esprit and, well, it's actually a little bit early in the year to start celebrating. In fact, I've got all the North American launch materials right here on my desk, and it was so late getting to my side of the Atlantic that they posted the debut as the next model year. But it's really okay to talk about this anniversary early because, quite frankly, Lotus would have loved to have had this car already on sale this time of year. They already been living with it for years because the concept car first debuted in 1972 in the Touring Motor Show. It was a Giorgio design, so they took it in, they refined it, and a production car really wasn't shown again until 1975 at the Paris Motor Show. And there were even delays beyond that, and it was time that Lotus really didn't have because Lotus was going upmarket with their entire car line at this time, and well, that first started in the form of the Elite and the Eclat twins, and well, those were grand touring cars, and that was something that Lotus hadn't done before. But the Esprit was a genuine sports car, and that made the natural successor to all the other Lotus cars that came before it. So you can kind of think of this in the same way where the Porsche 356 transitioned into the Porsche 911. It was the Esprit's job to not only be premium, but also carry on the spirit of all those sports cars that came before it. That's really how it earned its Esprit name. Of course, it also helped that it became one of the most iconic James Bond gadget cars of all time. It really was the only one to ever rival the Aston Martin DB5. And there's actually a kind of cool link between Aston and Lotus that we get into in a whole nother video that has to do with all sorts of cool facts you didn't know about the Lotus Esprit. There's a link to that video in the description below, but please don't click it just yet because I also want to get into the understanding that there was a lot more going on with this Lotus. Sure, the early cars were a terrific Bond vehicle, but there was just more here because, well, this was the era where you got some amazing cars where they were British built, but the lines came from an Italian pen. You see in Austin's Pininfarina cars and Triumph's use of Michelotti, where you gave ordinary cars a little bit extra pizzazz. Even the DB5 captured some of that idea. And in the case of the Esprit, it might have been born in Turin, but Lotus's designer Oliver Winterbottom and all their engineers spent years refining that idea. So you're starting to see where the special chemistry is? There's that pure poetry in Italian lines, but then there's that just touch of British restraint that adds a little bit more class. And that was the true heart of appeal and the true staying power for the Lotus Esprit. The Series 1 and 2 took them through the 1970s. There were also special editions like the John Player Special and the 2.2-liter update. 1980 was the debut of the SX Turbo, and it split the Esprit into two lines, naturally aspirated and turbocharged. The Series 3 would take him into the mid-80s, and in 1987 a radical revision of the Stevens body appeared. 1992 saw the Series 4, and in 1996 the Esprit finally got V8 power. The final big facelift happened in 2002. And then the curtain finally came down in 2004, but by that time the legend was absolutely cemented. In fact, if you like watching old Top Gear, you might even remember an episode where James May was talking about where people around England were getting mysterious faxes around that era.
Yeah. Now, this has actually come from the manufacturer. When you ring from Lotus, when you ring the number, they will say to you, "What's that picture that's come through on your fax machine?" And you'll say, "Oh, that's the Lotus Esprit." And the reason they're doing that is because they want to prove that this is their shape and then copyright it.
How can they do that?
Well, we can ensure they don't, okay? If you get one of these on your fax machine, ring the number, and when they say, "What's that picture?" you say, "That's a piece of double Gloucester."
Today the Esprit has been gone for decades, and well, there have even been some attempts to revive it that have failed, but it's still very much a worthy icon. In fact, I was a judge at the Hilton Head Concours this year, and my category was all about cars from the 80s and 90s, and I still gave an award to an Esprit V8. It may have been born in the 70s, but was a kind of generational icon that really let its desire bubble up for decades. I mean, we're talking about the kind of thing where maybe you were introduced to the Esprit when you saw A Spy Who Loved Me in the theaters, or maybe you're a kid who actually knew that you could, send away for a very cool brochure like this, or maybe you just loved having a poster on your wall of the really colorful SX Turbo. Well, the Esprit was one of the few cars that had a long enough timeline where it allowed you to grow up, become affluent, and still walk into the dealership and buy one brand new. And quite frankly, there just weren't enough of those dream cars of our youth that stuck around long enough that we could actually make them a reality. So that's what makes the Esprit so worthy, and that's why we want to celebrate this milestone. Thank you for watching.